Hey, what's up, everyone? Welcome back to Hustle Footy. It's your boy Ray, and the boys are back. Mac is here,
What's good?
and Gio.
What's good, everyone?
And today, guys, we're going to be reviewing some midweek action from the Champions League and the Europa League. And in addition, we'll be previewing some upcoming action from the weekend in English football. Before we get into it, don't forget to follow us on our social medias, both on Twitter and Instagram. Our handle is @houseof_footy. Also, don't forget to rate, review, and subscribe to us. We are on both Spotify and YouTube. And lastly, feel free to get in touch with us via email. We love hearing from you guys, and we want you guys getting involved. Our email is houseoffooty@hotmail.com. But let's get straight into it, guys. Champions League action, basically wrapping up the remaining games from this first knockout round of games. Man City 7, RB Leipzig no in this game. 8-1 in aggregate for Manchester City. Mac, walk us through this game, please.
Oh, it really started off because I think going into it, Ray and I, we discussed in our previous podcasts that we did expect City to come out quite aggressive and really have a statement performance. Given how in the first leg of this fixture, it ended up with 1-1, there was a lot of kind of disappointment, I would say, in terms of how that performance went. So it really kind of played out the way that we thought, but more to an extreme way, I would say. It was interesting to see that we've reverted back to that kind of 4-3-3 formation with KDB and Gundogan holding the midfield, and of course Haaland on top with both Bernardo Silva and Jack Grealish starting on opposite flanks. So it's much more, I would say, a traditional City lineup, even though some outlets had it looking like it would be a little bit different, but it really was kind of back to the norm for them, and very much so back to kind of a norm of a performance you would see from the City team these last couple of years without Haaland, where they really kind of stampeded the midfield. RB Leipzig couldn't really get out of their own first half, their own half in a lot of different times. City dominated possession on the ball a whole lot, and there's no nice way to say this, but Haaland was like a predator in Alien versus Predator. He was lapping up at every single chance he could get. It seemed like he had a magnet stuck to the bottom of his foot and the football at the same time. Because whenever there's a rebound, there's a scuff opportunity, there's only one person that was really going to land to. So you can say it's striker's instinct. You can say kind of the luck of the moment. But he had himself a game where after the first penalty went in, which I guess maybe we might talk about that, by the end of the first half, he already had a hat-trick, and the whole tie was over, really. So overall, if you're a City fan, this was a kind of a game that I feel like was needed, and a game that shows really their quality going forward and potentially what they could do for the rest of the season.
Yeah, for sure. Great way to start off that game, Gio. Man City really needed to set the tone for this game and really ensure that they weren't giving RB Leipzig any chance to get in the lead or even and get their foot on the ball at all. And it showed. Haaland had early chances. I think Gundogan had also early chances as well. And then, the penalty call came a little bit unfortunate, Gio, I would argue. But it was put, obviously, away by Haaland. What did you think of that penalty, though, Gio?
Honestly, at first I was kind of hesitant on it. But again, these days with VAR, it's hard to overturn things. As soon as it touches someone's hand, it's almost like a sure gone penalty. But in a lot of cases, I think there was one that was kind of overturned. I think it was a game yesterday where there was a handball, but it was kind of indirect, and then they actually never gave it a pen. But a lot of these times, referees are just almost barely looking at it. As long as it touches the hand, they're almost kind of giving it to him. So I'm not surprised that it was. Again, even without the penalty, I think it would have been a shellacking regardless. As we can see, even if you minus one goal, even if you minus two goals, it was quite the showing for Man City. So, I think you called it in the group chat. You were calling for a 5-0. It was well above the 5-0. So good call on that one. Very lopsided win for anyone who bet the over. Obviously, congrats. But no, it was a great game for Haaland, especially because he wasn't sort of a little slump in terms of scoring and finding his form again to what his peak can be and to score. Although some of these goals were a little too easy in some people's eyes, as a striker, you still have to put yourself in the right place, and I think he did that very well. And he could have had a couple more, as he said in the post match interview with Thierry Henry. So yeah, no, I think great showing for Haaland. You can't take anything away from that.
Yeah, for sure. I think the penalty you might be referring to was in the Liverpool Madrid game. End of the game, I think that was the one where Liverpool player touches the ball with his hand, but
you guys got it. You guys got it.
But yeah, for sure that penalty call. Yeah, I could see both as well. Actually, given or not given, obviously that changes the game for one way or the other. But like you said, Gio, you can't really make a case for that really being the ultimate game changer, because at the end of the day it was 7-0. And so Mac, and I know that this is a question you wanted to ask as well, but obviously Haaland gets his 5 goals before, I think it was the 69th, in the 60-minute mark when he gets taken off.
The 57th minute is when he gets his 5th. And then he's taken off in the 62nd, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, 60 in the 60th, right? Around that time, he's taken off, and like Jill mentioned, he wanted to and could have added more. And his post-match comments were really, yeah, it's great. He wants to score more though, and he's always looking for ways to improve his game. And I think this is really. People might say, a lot of his goals aren't the most flashy goals, but in this system, I think that this is the system where he'll be able to learn not just the goal scoring aspects of obviously his position, but the link-up play and all the other aspects that come to it. What do you think about that, Mac?
Absolutely. I think he's spot on in terms of different things he can improve on, because he highlighted a couple of moments in even the first half where he could have done things a little bit different. And I think he understands his weaknesses, and he kind of was able to list them out. And the one thing that if he did move to, let's say, a different club, I would say outside of Manchester City, they would kind of put him in a position to shoehorn him in a way where, okay, this is what you're really good at. We're trying to accent that. We're trying to be able to make sure that you continue to do that. And he's not really improving as a footballer, and that seems to be his primary focus. So under the City team, he has a manager that has the cachet, and assist players around him that have the cachet to improve those other aspects in a play style that would be beneficial to him. At the same time, still be in a position where he's like, okay, this team hasn't reached this level yet. If I take them there, it kind of enshrines himself even further and kind of fully elevates himself, not just technically, but also kind of globally, and how people would view him as a player. So I think that's very, very important. The tough part is that I want to kind of draw some conclusions from this game, but it's tough because Manchester City, especially in the Champions League, even though I think both of you enjoy the fact that they haven't won it yet, in the Champions League at home, they're still a very, very dominating team. They're unbeaten in the last 23 home games in the Champions League, winning 21 of them. So they're absolutely destructive at home. The question is, even in the first kind of leg of this round, is that are they going to do enough away where they don't rely so much at home? That's more where the questions will come, and this game doesn't answer that, but I feel like at the same time it does put them in positions like, hey, this is a stamp of authority, this is something that as a team, as a unit, we can go out and do, and kind of put in a way the fear of God in the other teams that are going to be playing them in this competition going forward.
Yeah, like Haaland himself mentioned, he wants this to be a statement. Hey, we're Man City, we're here, and that's exactly what that he sort of insinuated he was brought here to do, to bring that Champions League trophy to Manchester City. But Gio, Mac wanted to know, Haaland is taken off, and there's obviously a lot of talk online about him protecting Messi's record from being overtaken, potentially scoring more than those 5 goals in that game. What are your thoughts about that?
Well, 100%, 100%. We know Pep's love for Messi, and he wants to preserve anything that he can for him, as do many Messi stans. So fair on his part. Loyal to Messi. So, I greatly appreciate loyalty. So good for him, but also fuck him, as he could have had easily. He could have had 7 himself. Like you talked about his positioning and stuff like that. He could have had 7, but 5 is great. So obviously at that point, there's no need for injuries. I know it can cause frustration for Leipzig players that may cause them to. I'm not saying they would, but go into challenges a little harder. Just to prove a statement there. So yeah, you scored your 5. That's more than a lot of people can ask for. Come off and take a rest, man.
Yeah, man. The game's done. There's no need for any additional things in the game for at least Holland. But someone who was still very active towards the end of the game, Mac. And I know, Gio, you weren't here for that podcast, but Mac was sort of a little bit questionable about sort of De Bruyne's form so far, or at least in the last couple of weeks. But that goal to close it off, Mac, Kevin De Bruyne, looks like he was answering your sort of doubts with that sort of finish. And man, that was, I think, obviously the goal of the game. So, what are your thoughts about that, Mac?
For sure, that was I wasn't questioning his quality. Don't do that to me. I was saying Pep was saying, reminding him, focus on the simple things. So don't do that. In terms of course, KDB, it was great to see him come back into form, because even in the moment, in terms of, I think it's Haaland's second goal is the one that goes off the top of the crossbar, comes back, and Haaland gets the rebound. That in itself was a phenomenal shot. A great moment from a player kind of that can exude quality. And this potentially could be a game where he kind of, just as other players in this City squad have kind of tried to reintegrate themselves over time after dropping off for a little bit form-wise, like Phil Foden, where he was there to come back in, play a string of 4 or 5 games in a row, really play well, take a rest here, and then KDB now can kind of step in and do his thing. So it's kind of like, it's interesting because he can always kind of have someone on a heater when they realize that, okay, maybe for whatever reason, if it's fitness levels or form or kind of what he wants to be able to get out of the game in terms of tactics, he can move things around, and someone else that he can kind of build up and bring in, and having the ability and the facilities to kind of rest a player like Kevin De Bruyne and take him away and still perform very well. It kind of only adds injury to insult in some ways, where he's able to come back in and still do what he does, right? So overall, it's great to see. And hopefully, if you're a City fan, something that does kind of carry forward for him. Because the greatest part for me, in all honesty, I think that he played the full 90, which he was one of the few players from that City team that, kind of are more of a consistent mainstays to stay out for the full game.
Yeah, definitely something interesting to note, and Man City now, Gio, continue their quest for a treble for this season, and they have a upcoming FA Cup game against Vincent Kompany's Burnley, who are doing quite well in the championship. They've gone, as Matt put it, a total opposite of style of what they previously were before. Very expansive, very possession based, and even Mac mentioned Pep has hailed him as a potential future Man City manager. What are your thoughts about this game? You haven't seen Man U play Burnley earlier this season.
I think out of respect, Pep might only put 4 past him and control the rest of the game. Out of respect, he was his former player, but I think there is still levels to this. Obviously, Burnley doing very well in the championship, so you give him credit there. But in terms of again, a Premier League side, you still have to edge it. Obviously, in a game like that, Pep is notorious for playing, a lesser of a lineup. But even then, I think that lesser of the lineup is still quite capable of dominating possession, controlling the pace of the game, and even scoring a few. Because guys like guys like maybe Mahrez or Silva are going to get a little bit more, get a couple more touches there, and they're still of the highest quality players. So I think they won't have too much trouble there.
Okay, I guess Matt, quickly to wrap it up, what are your predictions? Very similar to Gio's for this weekend.
I think Pep is probably going to go to Vincent Kompany and be like, okay, you know what? I have a crazy idea that I want to try out that normally I would do in the Champions League in like the semifinals. Can I get that on my system now, please? And Kompany be like, you know what? I got you. You can still get the win, and I'll allow you to cook. So I think that's more so what I'm looking for in this matchup.
For sure. We'll see if potentially Julia Roberts makes her way to this Man City game this weekend, but that's yet to be determined. So let's move on, guys, to another Champions League game we're going to cover now is Liverpool were away at Madrid, and Real Madrid finished business 1-0 at the night, 6-2 on aggregate. And really from the start of the game, were very, very aggressive in sort of ensuring that Liverpool didn't really build up a head of steam very much like they did in the first game, and just managed it, exposed a couple of the weaknesses that Liverpool had as well. But hey, that's the type of performance you want, I guess, if you're a Real Madrid fan, for this match. What are your thoughts?
I think kind of well put. Liverpool didn't really come out and shock them in any way to say that, okay, we're going for goals and we're trying to catch up in goals and we're trying to beat you in goals. With that being said, I also thought Real Madrid kind of shocked them. They didn't really sit back by any means. Whenever they had the chance, they took the ball and tried to drive it down Liverpool's throat, which was a great plan because Liverpool, isn't obviously the best defensively this season, and knowing that they have to exude all that energy to attack as well, they're going to be tired on the defense. They're going to be even more vulnerable on the defensive end, and I think, in the midfield especially is where they kind of dominated, and then especially Vinicius against Trent Alexander-Arnold was obviously a very notable matchup that was very favored in Vinny's way. But yeah, I think in the midfield, particularly Camavinga had a great game. Luka had an alright game, but he still showed the class between a good midfield and a below average midfield. I think the game was won and lost from there, and it shows what Liverpool is desperate to add to their team, and that's a strong midfielder player, or a couple of strong midfielder players actually.
Yeah, for sure. Definitely looking to add in that area, but in the front, Mac, they did start with an aggressive lineup: Gakpo, Salah, and Nunez, with Jota in the midfield. And not really, I wouldn't really classify Jota as a midfielder, so you kind of expect him to be more of a front four in this type of game. Obviously, chasing a 3-goal deficit. Very open first half, Mac. I think there were 10 corners at the end of the first half, 5 each. Plenty of chances both ways. It's just didn't look like it was going to happen for Liverpool. And at the other end, Mac, Alisson made some terrific saves to keep Real Madrid out. How did you see Liverpool? What was missing for this Liverpool team, I guess, in this game?
I think in terms of their approach to the game, I think was spot on. Playing with an attacking front four, because Klopp played both James Milner and Fabinho in midfield, really two defensive holding players. Milner doesn't have the legs as much to be able to go up and down the pitch, really, for in a more of an aggressive sense. So it's kind of, okay, we're going to split our defenders here 6. Maybe Trent and Robertson on either side are going to be in position to be able to get an overlap. That's great. But really, we need the front four to be able to create something. And they did. They had a lot of opportunities in the first half. I think Nunez had 2 different good opportunities. Jota should have scored one. Gakpo could have easily scored as well. There was a couple different opportunities there. So you're happy with the fact that they got opportunities to score, but they lacked that clinical touch where easily if maybe 2 of those chances go in, it starts to heap pressure on the Real Madrid team, and you can potentially see that it could potentially break them down. But the deeper that goal into the game that goal didn't occur, the more resolute the Real Madrid team became. So I feel like that's more so where they won and lost it, is that in this position, they need to come out in the first 15, 20 minutes, get at least a goal, and see if they can apply more pressure and kind of have that snowball effect. So I think that's more so what they missed. And then as soon as kind of halftime hit, it really felt like, okay, there's not enough time for be able to do what we need to do. So that's, I would argue, is the unfortunate part from a Liverpool fan's perspective. At the same time, I think to a certain extent, I'll be honest with you, I think if you are a Liverpool fan, you're probably tired of seeing Real Madrid. I think this is the first time in Champions League history that a team's been knocked out 3 times in a row in 3 consecutive years by the same team. And interestingly enough, it's in completely different stages. I think it's the round of 16, quarters, and finals. I think it was, if I remember correctly.
That sounds right.
Yes.
That sounds right.
You're probably just tired of seeing them, and you don't want to see them again. You probably hate them very much. As well as Liverpool, this, in terms of an aggregate of a Champions League, this is their biggest loss they've ever ever kind of occurred to the club. So this is kind of, even though I'm saying that and it seems very negative, seems very porous, I do think that the first, let's say, 40 minutes, maybe 35 minutes of this game, maybe I would argue even the first half, Liverpool looked almost like you would used to see them play. It's just they just missed that finishing touch.
Yeah, I mean, I take what you're saying. It looked more like there was a purpose, whereas against Bournemouth the weekend, the game that passed in the weekend, it looked very, very slow, not very much thought into it, and so that's definitely a positive performance in the first half for Liverpool. But yeah, as you said, Madrid iced the game out, and especially had to make sure that this was taken care of because Gio, they have a big game upcoming this weekend, and I know we don't talk too much about La Liga, but Barcelona are first in La Liga, 9 points ahead of Real Madrid, and with Madrid still chasing that title as champions from last year, they're definitely going to be keeping an eye on that. So yeah, I think it made sense for them to come out strong and finish this game before they sort of changed their sort of interest in Barcelona's game this weekend. What are your thoughts about that? And can we get a quick prediction for that game?
I think, look, they're definitely playing with the chip on the shoulder after losing the last time they faced, which was a tough match. Look, I still think a couple of guys are injured and aren't fully fit for that Barca game. But that being said, I think Gavi's out. No, I think Gavi's hurt. So there's a couple of yeah. So I think there's a couple of Barca players on there. I think it's going to be a 1-1 draw. To be honest, this is for La Liga, so obviously Real's going to want to go out there and try to put it to them, gain some ground on the league. But I think so. If Barca aren't clinical enough to put goals away, they are good enough to keep the ball and kill time. So if they do get their goal, I think they'll be more than happy to just steal a point, and just really just kill the game and control the pace, while Real Madrid try to chase and send long balls all game long.
Yeah, 8 goals against this whole season for that Barcelona backline, so that's definitely impressive for them. But I guess to wrap up this part, guys, quickly, now that we know all the teams in the sort of quarterfinal matchups, Mac, who is your favorite and who do you want to win the Champions League? Is it the same team or is it 2 different teams?
So who I want to win, I personally don't care. I'll be honest with you. I have no stakes here. I'll be honest with you. I very much just here for the banter and who's going to play the best football. In terms of my favorite, surprising to say, I think it's City. I think they're probably the most complete team, and on their day have the biggest variance in terms of how they can dominate a team. The interesting part for me is that I would argue if you asked me if there's 4 different teams that could win the Champions League, would I be surprised? No, because I think right now, as opposed to previous years where we had more questions, I feel like we do have a lot of answers from some of the favorites, so of what we can expect from them. But for me, if you were to ask me who's my odds-on favorite, I'm still going to go City, as I did at the beginning of the year.
Okay. Gio, same question to you.
If there's a will, there's a way, and it's Real Madrid.
Okay.
Everybody counts them out, whether it's injuries, whether it's not in form, but they always come and compete in the Champions League. It's what they thrive for, and is what they yearn for. They were down early in the Liverpool match, and look what they did to Liverpool. So they never count themselves out, and I don't think by now viewers should count them out either. They always have a shot, whether it be Man City last year or Liverpool this year, whatever the case may be. I think they always have that edge, being the champions. So yeah, I don't think we never count them out.
Yeah. That being said, though, there are 2 other teams that I think could be considered as favorites as well at this point. Bayern Munich, obviously, defeating PSG in their tie, and Italian leaders Napoli. So I personally want Napoli to get into the finals. That's going to be a very, very fun thing to see if that happens. Yeah, I would want Napoli to win it personally. But anyways, sorry, Matt, you had a question?
Personally, I want them to get out as soon as possible so that Arsenal could potentially sign Kvaratskhelia. And if they have a poor season in the Champions League, I feel like that's more likely. As well as if they get knocked out, then maybe Man U sign Osimhen instead of Kane, and that would be much more entertaining for me as well. Sorry, that's all I can say.
We'll keep an eye on what activity happens, because I think Napoli after the end of the season, it's going to be a fire sale. But we'll see what they do. All right, guys. So we'll take a quick break here, and we'll be back with some Europa League action. So stay with us. Welcome back to Hustle Footy, guys. We are going to continue with our podcast now, discussing the Europa League games in this midweek. Arsenal Sporting played a 1-1 tie in regular time, went to extra time, and then penalties, Mac, where unfortunately for Arsenal, they were knocked out. But in thrilling game overall. I think Sporting put a much better performance than I expected, and Mac, you mentioned that they would as well. And so, what were your thoughts on this game? Kind of a tale of two halves, or is there more into it?
I think if you were to ask me in terms of what was kind of wrong for Arsenal from the jump, I think it was Arteta kind of pulling a Pep, because initially going into the game they adjusted formation after their previous matchup against Sporting last week, where of course Arsenal through the entirety of this year have played with a 4-2-3-1 system. But in actuality, what happens is it becomes 3 defenders, 2 inverted defensive midfielders, really, and then a kind of an attacking 5. You saw an adjustment of shape where Reece Nelson, who's played as a winger predominantly when he's come on for Arsenal, plays as a wide back, like a wing back really, and Zinchenko on the other side, because they were so worried in terms of Sporting's performance in the previous matchup with their wide players potentially getting out on the break. What that really did is that it kind of left Arsenal's midfield, I feel like, a man down, because Zinchenko had so much space to be able to travel, to be able to get back into the play, where Sporting, for large sections of the game, I felt like, and to their credit, especially I would argue, before Arsenal's goal, and then pretty much for the entirety of the second half, were very much in control of the pace and the tempo of the game, whereas that's been Arsenal's strength thus far this year, is where they're able to kind of dictate the game to their opponents, versus by this system adjustment, I feel like Arsenal ended up being kind of playing into Sporting's hands. I think it's unfortunate in that manner, but I understand the initial thought process. But of course, with competitions like this, if you just have that one bad decision in terms of a setup, tactics wise, it can leave you knocked out. And I feel like that's what happened to Arsenal today.
Yeah, definitely a very interesting approach from Sporting, who were missing a couple of players to begin with for this game. But Arsenal did take the lead, Gio. A ball through by Jorginho found Martinelli, who had his shot saved, and Xhaka, as he's been doing all season, following up, getting inside in the box, and putting chances away. At that point, it looked like, even though Sporting did have like a flurry of chances in the beginning, or some chances in the beginning, Arsenal would just put the foot on the ball, dominate as they have this whole season, and really assert the dominance, I guess, over Sporting. But I guess, Gio, second half, Sporting really stepped it up. And what were your thoughts on how Arsenal approached that second half?
No, I think it was just, on top of, Sporting actually looking quite good in the first leg. I think the added injury list of Arsenal, obviously making 2 early subs for the defenders. Obviously, that threw their back line for kind of a whirlwind. Those guys aren't usually paired together. Not understanding each other's tendencies. That didn't help either, because Sporting had a lot of through balls in attack. I know Edwards had a couple of chances in on goal. And to be fair, this was after they had already scored that worldie. But the ball through to Edwards, and then he smashed it off Aaron Ramsdale's face. I'm surprised Aaron Ramsdale could stand up at that point, because that was a pretty hard shot. And this guy's a professional soccer player. I'm sure he shoots quite hard. Balls like that, where they were able to find seams, where the Arsenal backline just didn't look as neat as they typically would in a, say, like a Premier League game that we've seen them play, or other matches in general that they've played. So yeah, that definitely played into Sporting's advantage, although they were missing a couple of guys. And yeah, they just looked the slight bit hungrier. It's not to say that Arsenal wasn't hungrier, but Sporting was literally only had eyes for the goal. Everything was push, push, push. I don't think they barely passed the ball backwards. It was, if we can get the ball forward, we know we are faster than their back line, and we will win the ball in those tighter areas. So, and they did for a lot of the match. So good for them. And then it went to pens, and it was unfortunate for Arsenal. But I think in hindsight, I think we've discussed this before, that this might be better for Arsenal to focus on the Prem as it is nearing the end. So, and I think all the pundits will agree it's a tough loss, but I think, if you watch other YouTube videos, I think a lot of those professional pundits would kind of almost agree, especially Arsenal fan pundits would agree that, them being out of the competition isn't necessarily a bad thing, because they're going to get their Champions League spot regardless if they focus on the league, and especially winning the league. So yeah, not a bad loss for Arsenal. Tough to be exited out of a competition as they are athletes and they are competitors, but in hindsight, I don't think it's a bad thing for them.
Yeah, you mentioned, Gio, there were some changes that Arsenal were forced to make early in the first half. And Mac, you mentioned as well, as Sporting grew into it in the second half, it looked like Arsenal wanted to bring more control, taking off Jorginho, putting on Partey. I think Saka came on as well. Odegaard came on. And even Trossard some more attacking power, and also to give Gabriel Jesus, who had been coming back from injury, some rest ahead of maybe this weekend for some action there. But yeah, after those players came on, Arsenal did have chances. You mentioned they weren't really interested in passing back, Sporting, but the one time that they did in added time, they put Trossard through, and Adnan made one of many amazing saves towards the end of this game. Was it just a matter of Adnan pulling saves to keep this Arsenal team away? And sort of what were your thoughts towards the end of the game as it got closer and closer to pens?
It's an interesting proposition where Arteta was in, because the Gabriel Jesus substitution, that I feel like that very much was pre-planned, where he's going to just get 45 minutes and Trossard came on for the second half and he would play the remainder of the game. But at a certain point, once Sporting didn't end up scoring a worldly of a goal, something phenomenal that we rarely see, and arguably the best goal of this competition may have seen from what my recollection. To be fair, I don't remember many Europa League goals, so it's, what can I expect? But literally within the next 3 minutes, substitutions happen where both Jorginho and Reece Nelson come out. So Reece Nelson come out, and Saka and Partey. And if you would ask Arteta, did I want to be able to use them this game? Would I have a preference where to see all those players out, where they can have a rest going into the Premier League this weekend? Absolutely. I don't think those players, in all likelihood, if the game wasn't tied up at that point, would have come on. So it was, how early do I reintroduce more players? He ended up bringing on Odegaard later on as well. And as the first selections choices for Arsenal came in, you saw more and more dominance. But the tough part is, the earlier you put them in, then you're leaving them in a position where they're vulnerable for the coming weekend game on Sunday. So it's that balance there. And I think it got to the point, especially going into the extra time, where Arteta's like, we have to go all out. We have to be in a position, this is a game now we have to win, given the fact that we've already utilized so many resources and the injuries we've already picked up throughout the game. So it was more so, I think, that the level of quality these players brought back in, and the control they brought, because a midfield trio with Xhaka, of course, but then Vieira and Jorginho isn't probably the way to be the most successful, because both Vieira and Jorginho, I would argue, are not kind of the strongest on the ball, and sometimes kind of lack making great decisions, in my opinion. And there were quite a few times where Arsenal will try to get back possession, and you would have experienced with either a Partey or an Odegaard kind of a level of calmness where, okay, now let's circulate the ball. They would make more of a rash decision. Unfortunately, it would come back at the other hands, where Sporting then can get back on the pressure, right? So Arteta was in a position, like I said, balancing those scales to see what worked well to make sure that you win this game, but at the same time protect this weekend. Overall, I feel like even though Gio said in terms of, in some ways you can look at it, it's a positive they came out of this competition. I think this was the worst possible way to do it, considering everything that did happen. Because if they lost in regular time, then you could argue that players are more rested. If the injuries didn't occur, then now you can be in a position to be better. But it's I feel like it heaps so much more pressure coming onto the Sunday's matchup against Crystal Palace. So it's unfortunate that way. So it's of course it wasn't the most exciting thing for me to see for sure.
That being said, like you mentioned, Mac, Crystal Palace on the weekend for Arsenal in the Premier League. A chance for them to extend the lead further now that Man City are, as we mentioned, they are going to be in FA Cup action, so they won't be playing in the league. Gio, is this a great way to them for Arsenal to just put that Europa League loss out of mind? Crystal Palace struggling in the Premier League more recently, currently 12th place in the table, and sinking very, very quickly. I think there's even talks about Vieira potentially being considered for that position, and with injuries here happening and being able to rotate the squad for Arsenal, is this the ideal matchup for Arsenal, Gio, or could this be a further, I guess, poor result for Arsenal after that result?
Honestly, yeah, no, I don't think it is the ideal matchup. It's obviously not the worst matchup that can happen, but I don't think it's an ideal matchup. Look, again, like a sporting team, they love to run. So they are going to be a very pacey side again. So you're going to have to figure out what you want to do with that back line, how you set up, not to push too far up. Because again, they will beat you on speed if you try to, kind of control the game a little higher up the pitch. They are very capable of that. So, if they don't want what happened again today, and Crystal Palace getting those chances, then yeah, they're gonna have to come with a pretty strong game plan. Again, there's a saying when animals are most dangerous when they're wounded. They need to fight back. That's kind of Crystal Palace at this point. So if I'm Arsenal, I'm going in like I'm facing a top 6 side at this point. You got to make sure you get your points here, especially again, we don't know how long those guys are going to be out for. If it's just a nick, and they could kind of battle it out and play on the weekend, by all means. But yeah, no, they have to prepare like they're playing a top 6 side.
Okay, same question for you, Mac.
I think this is a must-win game for Arsenal without a shadow of a doubt. Given the fact that this is on schedule-wise one of the easier games they do have to play. They still have to go, because it's at home against Crystal Palace, a team that's not in great form. They still have to go to Liverpool. They still have to go to West Ham. They still have to go to Man City, and they still have to go to Newcastle all this year as for the remainder of the season, and still have to play home against Chelsea, which is always a tricky fixture for Arsenal, given that they're London rivals. So they are up against it fixture list wise. So playing against a Crystal Palace team is something that they have to kind of come out and make sure that they do get all 3 points. And especially given this most recent result, where it just kind of heaps that further pressure where, okay, this is the only thing you're playing for right now. This is kind of everything that you have to focus on. So it kind of further heaps more and more pressure there. I think mentally, this can be a trap game, because you can come into this game very deflated thinking that, oh, we just lost a penalty shootout. They could argue, given the chances at the end of the game, especially with Gabriel, they could have easily won this game. And if their season can be coming out and being all undone, similar to, it's tough to say, last year, where Arsenal, around the same timeline, looked to be in a great position in making the top 4, but the season fell out from underneath them after having a string of poor performances. So is this going to carry over? It's tough to say. But I do feel like, though, if Arsenal do rebound, this might put them in a position, okay, now we're 8 points ahead of Man City with 11 games left. This is a great position, and it'll give, I think, if they do pick up the 8 point, get the 3 points here and have that 8 point lead, I think at that point, if you were to ask me who's my favorite to win, I think I might finally flip and say Arsenal if they're able to do it, which is weird to say considering they're playing at home to Crystal Palace. But it is what it is. The beauty of football, right?
That is definitely the way the league has been going, and it's very, very fun as well, this matchup, because we talked about earlier, City are facing Burnley. former Man City player returning to Man City. Vieira, former Arsenal player, returning to the Emirates now. Could there potentially be a deal made? Teta goes to Vieira, hey, you throw this game, and you can come on to my staff when they sack you at Crystal Palace. Obviously not going to happen.
100%. No. What do you mean not going to happen? It has to happen. What are we talking about here?
It has to.
What do you mean?
Hey, we will have to watch what happens, and maybe Jordan Ayew can show us where he got those pictures from. But hey, we'll see what happens after the result from this weekend. But let's take a last break here, guys, and then we'll be back previewing some more weekend action. So stay with us. Welcome back to the House of Footy, guys. We are just going to finish off the podcast previewing some of this weekend's action. But before we talk about Man U Fulham, Man U were in action today at the time of recording against Real Betis, their second leg match, where Man U won the first one, I think it was 4-1, Gio, and were able to finish this game courtesy of a Marcus Rashford goal. Pretty good performance after the disappointing, I guess, tie against Southampton in the weekend. What were your thoughts about this game?
I thought overall it was a game that suited Man U. They were obviously playing with the lead 4-1, so there was going to be space for them to counterattack. That's what they love to do, and that's their bread and butter. And they did a lot of it very well, but they almost kind of when you're playing that free, sometimes you kind of lose your head a little. They had a bunch of chances where they could have put away, particularly a through ball to Marcus Rashford that he skied over the net. There's one outright that he could have put past the keeper, but what he just shot it at the keeper. Again, sort of frustrating for him, especially also having quite a bit of chances in the Southampton game as well. So he wanted to get him the game sheet. On the score sheet, and he finally did. Great outside the box shot, bending outwards to beat the keeper. Fantastic goal. But apart from that, I knew Real Betis were missing players themselves, so they were kind of struggling to even find rhythm or find that that last pass into the attacking third. I thought it was a very comfortable game for Man U. Through and through, and they took care of business, and that's it.
We're able to rotate the lineup. Pulisic coming on to play that game. Casemiro, who Mac will touch on that, played the full game for this tie, and even Bruno Fernandes and Marcus Rashford and Lisandro Martinez as well being taken off before the end of the game to just keep them fresh for this upcoming weekend, which is against Fulham in the FA Cup match. Mac, what do you see happening in that game?
In terms of the Fulham matchup, I think this could be very much an interesting fixture between the two, because the first time they've only played thus far once this year. Manchester United won 2-1. Christian Eriksen scored earlier on in the game. Dan James ended tying it up, but then Garnacho very much scored like a last gasp winner. Overall, you can argue that the game was very much tied in a lot of ways, and Fulham was missing Mitrovic in that game as well. So both teams, there's going to be quite a few changes from that matchup, as both Casemiro, of course, due to the red card, and Eriksen, due to his injury, are not going to be there. And that really leaves a big hole for me from what I see in terms of Manchester United's midfield. And probably I would argue in that game were two of the reasons why they were able to kind of, even though they kind of barely won out, were still able to kind of dominate a lot of the possession. So it'll be interesting to see what Erik ten Hag does as an adjustment going into this fixture. And of course, playing against a team that is getting some reinforcements back with, like I said, Mitrovic didn't play in the first matchup. Paulinho will be back after his red card as well. So he's been a key fixture for them. And of course, players like Pereira, who Gio was championing to, of course, score some goals against other teams to knock them out, might get on the reverse of that. So it could overall, even though I think Manchester United should be favorites, I don't think the odds should be really, really heavy, considering what they're missing and considering what Fulham can bring back and how far well they've performed when they've had their better players on the pitch.
Fulham were 3-0 losers to Arsenal in the weekend. Obviously, Arsenal played them out of out of the park in the first half, but I'm sure that they're looking to give us a better performance in this game. Gio, obviously, the FA Cup, now that it's down to 8 teams, we're in the quarterfinals now. You win this game in the semis, and who knows what could happen from there. And I think that would be very much a goal for Fulham, given the fact that they were just promoted to the league for this season, and an FA Cup run would be, above and beyond sort of what they were expecting. Because even though they are still, I guess, in and around the European spots, ninth right now, realistically, I don't think they would expect themselves to make it into Europe the first season. So a lot to play for Fulham, but as well for Man U, Gio. Still another cup competition. They've been performing well, already winning one this year. What are your thoughts about this upcoming game?
Yeah, if I'm Man U, I'm still, very interested in this competition. I think they want to, take that one. They're above, they're ahead of schedule in terms of getting the team back where they want to get the team back to, and try to rack in the trophies where they can. Obviously, trophies are a big thing, for teams. That's what the fans want to see. So, if they can get another trophy, especially another domestic cup under their belt, why not? And again, this is quite a favorable matchup. Not to be like cocky or anything, but I think it's still a favorable matchup nonetheless.
Yeah.
For Man U, very capable. And yeah, you might as well get some usage out of Casemiro, since he's going to be out of the next. Wait, can he play this game? I don't think he can play this game. No,
He cannot play this game. He's
he
out.
cannot play this game.
Yeah.
He cannot play this game. Does this game count towards his suspension?
It does count towards suspension, but he still misses
Perfect.
this game and the Newcastle game when he comes back, of course.
Okay, so let's
And one more.
Yeah, so perfect time, for other players to get touches now. So McTominay didn't look too bad. The last couple of times he appeared. So see what he can do. Get his transfer value up. I ain't mad at that. So yeah, no, I think it's gonna be a good match. I think Man U will take it.
Is there
for sure?
Oh, sorry to jump in. So I wanted to ask this. So what does he do in midfield then? You think it's a McFred sandwich back in the defensive mid pairing with Bruno on top? Because historically against Premier League teams, that hasn't gone very well for Manchester United. Especially, I would argue, against this type of midfield with Paulinho being back. Pereira's a quality midfielder as well. So could we see a position where Man U have to rely on the counter because they can't dominate possession in midfield so much? Because let's be honest, that's not McTominay's and Fred's strengths. They need someone else there on the base, generally beside them, to help dictate play, and both those players are out. Or do we see something a little bit more creative? Maybe does Bruno play deeper because that's what he tried in a previous game? Does Lissandro potentially play in midfield because Harry Maguire played in this previous game? Lindelof, I don't know. I don't think he's out due to injury. So you still have maybe theoretically more quality options there. So my question, I guess, to you, Gio, maybe you're a little bit more, you might have a better understanding of what may happen or what you would want to see happen. But that's my biggest question going into why I don't think they're heavy favorites, because I don't know what the answer to that question is, that I've seen perform very well. But they still have enough quality to pull through either way. But what would you have them do?
Because, okay, I would want to have McFred out there. I think they're the most compatible pairing, obviously barring the others that are one out from suspension and one out from injury. But you got to make do with what you have. And, they have played together. They do understand each other in a way. And they understand the assignment. And the assignment is to not let this midfield dominate. And these two players, again, are two players who are very willing to take a foul, very willing to, get a card. Hey, it's nothing new. It's nothing new for McTominay. So, if late in the game they do need to make that change in terms of that offensiveness. They have Marcel Sabitzer that they can bring on. Again, he is quite feisty himself, so I'm not too worried. Not too worried at all. I think we've gotten good games out of McFred and bad games out of McFred, but you kind of just hope for the best when they're on the pitch together.
McFred is still one of my favorite pairings of all time. But to that point, Mac, the question about sort of Fulham dominating midfield, I definitely agree that they have in this game because of the matchup the better midfield lineup. Though my question is, will Fulham really be the type of team to try to dominate possession? I don't really think they are the team at this point, maybe in the Marco Silva regime, where they are comfortable to keep most of the possession in a game against a Premier League team. And so, you know what? I think it's going to be chaos ball, and chaos ball perfect for our boy Fred, who loves that type of game. And as Gio said, a lot of fouls. I can see a lot of cards personally myself. Selfishly, a lot of fouls, a lot of cards, a very high intensity game, which will be very, very fun for the neutral. And I do agree, guys, that Man U are favorites. But who knows what will happen? Anthony Robertson will, of course, be back defending now that he's no longer playing Arsenal, and so he might actually put a defensive shift against whoever's coming up on the right wing with perhaps Anthony or maybe even Sancho getting some minutes up there. So interesting all around. Mac, what are your thoughts on Mitrovic? You said he missed the first game, I believe, for this first matchup, but he didn't look as involved for the Arsenal game, and I think he hasn't been on goal scoring form as much. Is this with the lineup and sort of defensive weaknesses that Man U have shown throughout the season? Is this a potential game for him to get back at the score sheet, you think?
Absolutely. I think that this could theoretically be a tough matchup for Manchester United defensively, especially given the lineup that they played out today, with Aaron Wan-Bissaka starting as a right back. If they're doing a rotation, the anticipation would be for this game, Dalot coming back to playing a right back position. And I can envision clearly someone down from right hand side from Fulham, if it's Tete, if it's Pereira coming on the right hand side, and just lofting a ball to the far post. And Mitro is literally sitting on Dalot's face. I could see that happen if that's the matchup there. So that leaves me.
Yo.
Well, am I wrong? Am I wrong? Could you literally see him peg him live on camera as we're watching this? I could see it happen. So if Aaron Wan-Bissaka is playing there, I feel like there is a little bit less of a concern, of course, because he's very, very strong defensively. But given the fact that there has been more rotation in the squad, it's tough to know. I think that matchup is very, very tough, especially because even though Martinez is very good in terms of dealing with balls on the ground, Mitrovic is a whole different animal, I feel like. And as you talked about, Ray, in terms of, I agree. I don't see a team kind of dominating possession, but I feel like the midfield domination that you can get from Fulham is where they're going to be able to play quick balls in the transition to get their wingers one-on-one, which is going to cause more crosses to come to the box for Fulham. Not necessarily a high percentage of per possession, but quality chances of putting balls in the box for a striker where, if you would ask me what's his best skill, it's not necessarily taking somebody one-on-one on the break. It's not necessarily kind of breaking somebody down or kind of linking play. It's more of those dominating the aerial set pieces. And if you would ask me, especially with no Casemiro as well on the defensive third, is it Mitro that a player that can ask a lot of questions to this Man U back line? Absolutely. Okay,
yeah. Well, I guess this leads us to last question for both of my co-hosts today. Final game predictions. Gio, I know you're still thinking Man U can pull through and continue their run in this cup competition. Your final predictions for this game?
My final prediction will be 2-1 United.
Okay. Mac, same question to you.
See, I hate to do this. I don't like doing this because it feels like there's something wrong in the universe when I do this. But I'm going to agree with Gio that Man U will win, but I think it's going to be a 3-2 win instead. I think it's going to be much more of a chaotic game, as Ray, you were saying, given what I've outlined. I don't think Fulham have just enough, but I feel like if it's a 3-2 scoreline, it could really go either way. But I'm going to give the edge slightly to Man U there, and they get that extra goal for me.
Yeah. Hey, I like that. For me, then, I'll complete it. I think Man U will win. there will be goals, but more importantly, there will be cards, and that's exactly what I'm waiting for. A FA Cup competition, cup games with cards, my favorite. So we'll definitely keep an eye out on that, boys. With that being said, this concludes our podcast for today. If you like what you heard, please like and subscribe to us on our social medias. Our handle is @house_of_footy. If you have any comments, suggestions, or general banter, feel free to get in touch with us via email as well, houseoffooty@hotmail.com. Next time you hear from us will be Tuesday when we review this weekend's Premier League and FA Cup games. On that note, thank you, Mac.
Since we all predicted Man U is going to win, that guarantees Fulham win, doesn't it?
That's fair. We'll see about that. And thank you, Gio.
Hey, take care, guys. Glory, glory.
All right.